Hello and welcome to Game Changing with me, Tim Thornton.
And me, Chris Sheldon.
In this podcast, we chat to various luminaries from the music world who we've met along the way.
About those key moments in their careers where the stars aligned and it all started to go right. The Proclaimers, The Excerpts, Wilko Johnson, Roger Daltrey, Kylie, Idlewild, and of course the Manic Street Preachers. These are just a small selection of the bands and musicians that have all benefited from the guiding hand of record producer Dave Eringa. Earlier this year, we sat down with Dave in his home studio to talk about his passion for music and recording and his career from T-boy to producer.
I think we can pretty much accuse him of showing off.
Yeah, definitely.
So before I forget to say, Dave, thank you very much for letting us do this with you, mate.
Thrilled to do it.
It's very exciting. I'm sitting here with Dave in his, what can only be described as a Bedouin tent of a studio, quite literally.
That was the plan.
Surrounded by gear. More esoteric gear, the better by the looks of things. So, you know what the whole thing's about, really.
Yeah.
We're just talking about early parts of the career.
Yeah, totally.
And, you know, how you sort of got going. So, let's kick off. And where did you start?
Also, I never wanted to do anything else. This was always the dream job kind of thing. So I met a guy on a... We didn't have any foreign holidays when I was a kid, except one, bizarrely, 5-day trip to Florida. And on the plane on the way back, I was like a young sort of metal kid. And on the plane on the way home, there was a guy in the chair next to me with really long hair. And I'd just been a precocious little bastard. Said to him, has anyone ever told you look just like Sammy Hagar? You know, who just started singing for Van Halen, you know. And he was like, oh man, when me and Sammy are in the studio together, people can't tell us apart. And it was like, and he was a record producer, which was something I'd never heard of. And he had done like a load of like American soft rock, like one of the Kiss solo records. And his name was Jeff Glixman.
Actually, I do know that name.
Right, yeah. He did Magnum, just like a narrow street through my heart. He did all of that, and I was just like, oh my God. And I talked this poor bloke's arse off for the whole flight home. And I just got off the plane and said, I want to do what he does. He's the coolest man I'd ever met, and that was that. And it was weird because then when I left school, I did have a place at university to do maths, of all things, but I gave myself a year off to get a job in a studio, you know, to do the thing I wanted to do, and did. And then 2 weeks after I started at Power Plant Studios, Robin Miller, Jeff Glixman booked in. He'd never worked in the UK before.
No.
So weird.
Synchronicity.
Little signpost, and a sort of, you weren't supposed to talk to the big American engineers and stuff like that because I wasn't on the session, you know. But he did come into the kitchen while I was making tea, and I mentioned it to him. And I wasn't sure whether he remembered or not. Really, he was very kind and nice. It didn't matter. It was just a kind of nice little signpost.
So what did you do? Did you just sort of write all the studios or something?
Yeah, I did. I mean, in those days, which makes me sound like such an old man.
Oh, mate, trust me, we started in black and white.
Yeah, no, completely. But in those days, you didn't have a computer at home. That wasn't something that you had. You know, so if you wanted to do a nice looking CV or something like that, you couldn't just do it on a computer and print it out. So I had to get a job in London to pay for the stamps, for the stamped addressed envelopes, and to get access to a computer so I could write a CV, so I could send out the job applications. So I ended up working in Guardian Royal Exchange in the city and having to get a suit and commuting into London for a few months. And then it was a couple of months before I was allowed on what was called the desktop publisher. And then I would have to stay back after work and write my CV, and then write the letter, and I applied to 200 studios. And I literally didn't have a clue, like no knowledge about any of it. So if I'd have got a job at a karaoke studio, I would have been just as happy, kind of thing. And it was just my very good fortune. From those 200 applications, I got 5 replies, 3 were rejections, and I got 2 interviews.
And it was Power Plant.
Power Plant, yeah.
Yeah. When would this have been?
I think it's 90.
Because I'm just trying to think, because Robin Miller was Sade, wasn't he?
Sade, Fine Young Cannibals.
That's right. He was flying high around there.
Super high. It was, there was Trevor Horn and there was Robin.
Yes.
And Robin was the sort of very slick side of 80s production.
Yeah.
Amazing ears. He's blind. And so his ears are off the hook. But the amazing thing with Robin was you know, at a time when a lot of studios were getting tape ops to sign on, Robin employed people properly. It wasn't like a massive hourly rate, but it was an hourly rate. And when you got the job, you went and had a meeting with him, and the first question he asked you was, what kind of producer are you going to be? And it just made you, it gave you such a strong bedrock to stand on. They kept you, like, it was really old school, the studio. Like, it was very much about control room etiquette, and, you know, you were there half an hour before the session, you cleaned the rollers on the tape machine every day, you demagged every day, and, you know.
Yeah, it sounds like how I started at Utopia.
We all did then. You know, that, it was very, you know, so it was quite strict, but at the same time, he wanted the studios full. So if there was time, you know, if there was downtime, he wanted you to get bands in and to hone your skill so that you were a better asset for the studio, kind of thing. Such a great bloke, still is. Because the big thing that Robin did for me, more than anything else, I was a really clueless kid, and I was really noisy, and like Power Plant was a cool studio where they were doing like all the Go Disc stuff, the Lars, and you know, and lots of slick soul and stuff like that, and I was going in there with, you know, hair down to my waist and a Kiss t-shirt, just like going, oh, isn't it all brilliant? And just, you know, every session was like, you know, was there to provide me with my training, you know, and I just didn't shut up. And
so you were like some mad jester who'd appear on the session.
I didn't make myself very popular with the rest of the stuff. I mean, I was even in a band by 3 months in. I was in a band with the maintenance guy. It was lovely, but I was you know, looking back, I was quite a frustrating presence.
You were a handful.
I was a handful, definitely. And the all of the studio staff called a meeting with Robin to tell him to sack me.
Oh, how mean.
No, well, you know, looking back, I can't really blame him. And you know, the following day, he took me to a quiet place in Power Plant on the way up to Studio 3 at the top of the building, and he just told me what had happened, and he said, but I told him, I think you're going to do something good one day, so you better prove me right.
That's extraordinary. Which is kind of interesting, because that leads us on to my next sort of question, which was, what did you do? How did it develop? So you started as a T-boy?
Yes, absolutely, yeah, T-boy. We had three stratas of pay at Power Plant. There was maintenance, which was like if there was no session in, or if you weren't on a session, cleaning leads, clearing the studios up, whatever. Then there was tape op, which was assisting a house engineer. So I was very much a tape op. I worked with, the chief engineer was Jim Abbas, who was, of course, super producer now.
Of course, yeah.
And then we had a producer management company with the studio. But what happened with me was, so the lady that was running the producer management company was Terry Hall, who runs All or Nothing Publicity now and is a close friend. So I remember her asking me one day in the restaurant that we had in Power Plant, she was saying, do you want to assist for the new Clash? And I was like, yeah. And so Robin Evans, who had used to be a house engineer at Power Plant, was now a young managed producer and had got the job to do the Manic Street Preachers' first single.
Okay, so this is before Steve Brown was involved.
Oh, long before Sony, long before anything. So they're a new signing on Heavenly Records. They have put out one little 12-inch called New Art Riot on a label called Damaged Goods, but really no, you know, proper release kind of thing. And so this was their first single on Heavenly, and Robin, who was, you know, very much family and was one of the engineers that would put up with me. Jim, bless him, didn't want to, like, I was a bit too noisy for Jim, and don't blame him for that one little bit. I had a few sessions he was like, yeah, not that kid. But Robin would put up with me, so I ended up making the tea for Motown Junk, the first Manic Street Preachers single. And I think, you know, they were massive outsiders at the time. They turned up with spray-painted T-shirts and...
Oh, I remember reading all the interviews in what would have been Melody Maker and NME at the time.
Yeah. And, you know, Richie and Nicky had all makeup on, you know, for the thing. They turned up in a transit that they were sleeping in. And so, you know, this was at a time when baggy was, you know, we just had the Summer of Love, you know, everything was kind of indie dance and dance music, and, you know, and they were makeup splattered punks with, you know, political slogans on their T-shirts.
Terrorism.
So, yeah, and they were outsiders, you know, and I think they came to this studio and there's me, clueless metalhead with a Kiss T-shirt on, you know, in amongst all these cool London people, and like I think they just recognised another outsider, you know, and we just hit it off. And you know what we hit it off was a love of Appetite for Destruction. Like,
Right.
because their manifesto at the time was the politics of Public Enemy and the riffs of Guns N' Roses. Like, that was what they wanted to bring to the mainstream kind of thing. And so we got talking about Guns N' Roses, and Robin Evans didn't really like that kind of music. He loved the Clash, but he didn't. He thought of Guns N' Roses as a metal band, which they never were.
No.
But me and James, and the rest of the band just hit it off over that and just talked incessantly about Appetite, and so we just hit it off. And when it came to needing a Hammond chord on Motown Junk, I was the one that knew where D was, and so I did, I got my first little credit when the single came out. It was keyboards by Dave Eringa, which was just.
So did you play keys as a child? Were you?
Yeah, it was like, I'm not being self-deprecating, so I'm a crap keyboard player. I know where it all is, and I can do some. I'm actually a half-decent organ player. Because a lot of pianists don't attack a Hammond like you should.
Yeah.
They're too sort of respectful of it, kind of thing. But I definitely knew where D was, and I knew how to slide up to it. So that was that. And so they used to write me postcards from tour and shit like that.
You really hit it off then?
Yeah, they were just lovely. They were just really lovely. The first band that I'd really connected with, So then they came back with Robin to do their second single, which was You Love Us, which was the heavenly version of You Love Us, the indie one. And we did that, and I played organ again, and we just had fun. And then they got their big deal with Sony, and so they got Steve Brown in and did Generation Terrorists, and they were kind enough to the easy bits of the keyboards. They'd get me down.
So they invited you back to do that?
Yeah. So when they were, we did that in Metropolis and the Hit Factory, and they'd get me down, and I had to go at Motorcycle Emptiness, but I wasn't good enough for that, So they needed a proper guy to do Motorcycle. But You Love Us and Crucifix Kiss and some of these other ones I could do. And they were just really sweet to let me, I suppose. And then Power Plant went bust. It all collapsed, and so I didn't have a job. And then I ended up getting a job at the Kinks studio, Conk.
Which is where we first met.
Yes, and I can even tell you what the song was.
God, I can't. What was it?
It was Cud, Purple Love Balloon.
Oh my God! Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. And I remember meeting you, and it was great. I thought you seemed like a nice bloke, and I just remember that. No, I remember because the A&R guy came down, and I'd done the mix, and it was all fine. And you were talking, obviously you were talking, chattering away.
I was awake, I was talking.
I think I took the gag off your mouth for 10 minutes.
Oh, fuck.
And you told the A&R guy that you were the guy to produce Bon Jovi, and they'd be crazy if they didn't use you.
Amazing!
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember that.
No, yeah. And I remember sort of raising an eyebrow and thinking, Jesus, this kid's got some moxie.
What?
But no, I think that's great. I love that.
God.
I love that. And there was something that's like, who the fuck is this guy? But I love that about you, Dave. I think that's brilliant.
That's just mental. I was brought in to tape up the Kinks album. So that's what I got the job for. They needed an assistant to assist the house engineer doing this big Kinks record. And then on the very first day, we were doing an overdub in the SSL room, and the engineer was busy, and Ray said, come with me, let's move the screen into the live room, because he wanted to do whatever he wanted, and he needed a screen. And he said push, and I pushed, and it caught his hand in the door. And he was like quite hurt, and he went running off upstairs, and he came back down with a bandage on his hand, and he told the studio manager he never wanted to work with me again. So on the very first day, I managed to make it in the Kinks studio. Managed to make it so that the Kinks didn't want to work with me. So, but that meant it was actually very lucky, because that meant that, I suppose the studio manager couldn't be bothered to sack me and go through the whole interview process again.
So she put
me in all the sessions on the SSL room, and the majority of them were dance remixes. So I got to learn the SSL really well, because with when you're doing that dance remixes off of the 2-inch, and you've got programmers coming in with samplers and all of that, you learn the topology of that desk really, really well. How to trigger the inline gates, and so that was a really good training. But all this time, some of that time, I was popping off every now and then to go and do a keyboard overdub for the Manics, and then they blew up, and then the thing that I suppose was vaguely lucky for me in a way was they'd made this incredibly glossy record. Steve Brown did a brilliant job. Motorcycle Lemon is amazing, very, very slick, very, very FM, and that was their plan, was to, you know, make every compromise to make a radio friendly record. But during that time, Nevermind hit. And all of a sudden, glossy production was completely out of the window, kind of thing. So American Sony thought, you know, this is the new Clash. They'd heard Motown Junk. It was like, oh, wow, this is press go. You know, they printed up Manic Street Preachers toilet paper. And then they heard Generation Terrorist, which was very glossy, and they were like, that's not what we want. So although it was a success over here, it wasn't exactly how they wanted it to be.
Were the band happy with it, though? Because you said that they set out to make a kind of a glossy.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what they wanted. It just so happened, because they spent quite a long time making it during a period of time.
The world changed around them.
The world changed around them, yeah. And so the way to enter that mainstream sonically was now different.
Yes.
You know, so I think they felt that they maybe wanted a little bit more control over their sound. And I've been lying to them consistently about how much engineering and recording I was doing. And so they, you know, said, well, why don't we try a track with you producing, you know.
Which brings you up to Gold Against Soul, isn't it?
Yeah. So we actually we did one song first, which was, they said, so it was the very first song. So they'd said, right, you know, will you produce this? And I was like, bloody hell.
So had you actually produced anything?
No, nothing, never. You know, not at all. I'd barely recorded a band, you know, like really. I mean, you know, bits and bobs at Power Plant, but really nothing proper at all.
So not much recording, not much production. You're the guy.
None of the above. Good bit of lying. And so we did a trial track in a studio in Kent, and I was like, oh, you know, they were like, oh, you producer, we'll send you a demo, you know, from the rehearsal room, literally just on a Ghetto Blaster recording. And so, you know, I got this cassette, and I remember, you know, in my little Ford Escort sticking it in, thinking, oh, what's it going to be like? It's going to be like Slash and Burn or Motorcycle Emptiness, you know. Oh, wow. And it was a 6.5-minute Metallica dirge called Patrick Bateman. I was like, oh,
Nice.
oh, this is different. And we went down and recorded that, and it ended up all right.
But how old were you?
That would have been 20.
So that's amazing.
Well, I was just quite clueless, so I didn't really feel any pressure. I was like, oh yeah, this must be how it happens. You know, this is what you do.
But there's just something fantastic, isn't it? I mean, I listened back to some of my early stuff, and there's just the naivety.
Yes, exactly.
You've got a rough idea of some parameters of recording.
Yeah.
But you just try anything. You do anything because you don't know and you don't care.
Yeah. No, amazing. I mean, because we did that. It didn't sound great. I think it was all dead in the water. And I did, off my own back, a mix of it at Conk and fluked it, and it sounded really good. And they were like, oh, actually, that could work, kind of thing. So then we did the demos for Gold Against the Soul. A lovely little, it's a residential demo studio in Surrey, not there anymore, called House in the Woods. It was amazing. And we did the vast majority of the songs on Gold Against the Soul in a week there, and they turned out really great. And it was Rob Stringer at Sony, you know, who is now the boss of Sony. But he was an A&R guy at Columbia then, who had signed the Manics and loved the Manics. And he called me into his office, and I thought I had to, you know, make my case for why I could do this. And I just got into his office. He said, all right, let's do this, shall we?
Isn't that
so, I mean, so it's, you know, as much as, you know, I owe the band everything, obviously, for doing this insane thing of getting a 21-year-old kid to produce their second record. I also deeply owe Rob and Martin, the record company manager. But so they sent us off to Hook End Manor, which
Jesus, that's where you did it.
Well, that's the thing. They said to us, or they said to me, you know, we're saving so much money on you that we can afford a really posh studio. So we went out to Hook End Manor.
That was about the poshest studio in Britain at the time.
500-year-old manor house, swimming pool, gym, great big live room with a stone room as well, big SSL. And so I had to learn on the job at that moment. So I mean, it's exactly what you said, like the not caring. I had 25 mics on the drum kit. You know, we had 9 weeks for 10 songs.
But you also, I mean, I have to say that one of the tracks on there, La Tristessa, I just think it's magnificent.
Now that one, we did the drums outside. There was a big door at the back of the studio, and I'd always wanted to do that for some reason. And it was hilarious. I remember when we were doing the drums out there were ducks in a pond nearby, and they were quacking, and Sean was getting really fucked off with it. And you just remember hearing this, right! And just hearing the sticks go slamming down on the snare, and then like... Like the silence, and then steps coming out. All right, let's do one more.
But I remember hearing that. I bought the single.
Did you?
Yeah, I did, because I really dug it. I thought it was great. And it's, I think...
Well, I bought a ton of yours.
Well, I tell you what it is, I think, Dave, as well. The one thing I always think about with your productions is I think you're a really musical producer. That's what
Really?
I really do. And I think listening to that track, there's just so much stuff going on. And again, I know it's the naivety of youth that you just keep piling shit on because, and obviously the older you get, you go, less is more, all that sort of stuff. But I think it's fantastic from the little keyboard part that plays going out of it. It's just, I think it's a fantastic production. I really do.
I know, it's a great song.
It's a great song, of course, which helps.
Van Gogh's last words and his suicide note: "The sadness will never go away." Okay. We had some backing vocalists come down. Some we wanted chick backing vocals kind of thing, and they came down from London, and we were like, and we gave them the words, and they're like, "Oh yeah, sorry, no, we don't sing in French." And I was like, no, it's fine though, because it's just do it phonetically. It's just la tristesse durera. Yeah, we don't sing in French. And I was like, yeah, but it's just the one phrase, and then it's a scream to a side. That's in English. But we just, if you just write it out like how you say it, not going to sing in French.
We're not going to sing it.
Yeah, we just it went on for quite a long time before. I said, could we just try it then? Like pretend it's English.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll give it a try, but I don't speak French, so.
I don't know what you're expecting.
It was really bad. We were all just looking at each other going, but.
Don't worry about it. I mean, I was looking at your CV, which is extensive. Things like Head Swim and, I mean, these Animal Men. Did you do that straight after?
Yeah, so
because that's quite punk rock.
Yeah, so Head Swim was kind of grunge, and which I was very into at the time. And I was on tour with. So when we finished Gold Against the Soul, they asked me to go on tour and play keyboards with them, which was wonderful and amazing. But was also I was very aware from the beginning was at the edge of my musical abilities kind of thing, so this was never going to be something that I wanted to do for the rest of my life, but it was a great perspective as a producer, feeling the excitement on the stage and wanting to get that onto tape kind of thing. So I did a year, we did Japan and we did Europe and festivals, and it was great, but I was very aware that I needed to keep my production career going. So I mean, Head Swim, the first EP we did with them, we flew, but this makes it sound a lot more glamorous than it was, because this wasn't glamorous touring. The band were an indie band, and we'd done a European festival, and I flew back, and I had to get a cab from Heathrow to Maison Rouge, and I recorded Head Swim 18 hours a day for 8 days, and then I had to literally get the train to my mum's house to pick up my washing, and then get back to the studio, finished in the morning, and then got a cab to the airport, and then went on another tour with the Manics. Came back, I think I had one night off, went in and mixed that, finished mixing it at 11 in the morning, but had to be at Heathrow for 3 in the afternoon that day to go to Japan for 3 weeks. And so I had no choice but to get in my car and drive home to my mum's to pick up my bag. And fell asleep at the wheel on the way home and crashed on the North Circular. But the car was still drivable, so I'm shouting at myself to stay awake. So I turn up at my mum and dad's with a smashed up car. So I'll fix it when I get back. Literally just picked up my case and had to get on the train and go to Japan for 3 weeks. So that was a pretty crazy year, that touring.
Yeah, you think?
And these Animal Men was the start of what they called the new wave of new wave.
This is something I know that I did as a producer, that I would quite often want to change direction.
Yeah.
After having done one kind of record. Did you feel the same when you did, or was it just because that happened to be the thing you were offered doing?
I would love to say that I had a brilliant and well-devised career plan, but at the time I was just a bit too young and it was all happening a bit too fast. And yes, if someone came to me and said, will you produce this, I basically said yes, because I was still very young at that point, and although Gold Against the Soul had been a hit and it was top 10 and all of that, it wasn't like the phone wasn't ringing off the hook, but by any means, because if you were a band, and you were 25, 26, did you really want to go in the studio with someone 4 years younger than you to produce your record? So yeah, I mean, and the Animal Men were great. You know, they were on the cover of the NME, and it was really spunky and.
Well, there was there was a band
exciting.
Smash.
Smash and these Animal Men were the two
They were
leaders
the ones,
of the new
weren't they?
wave and new wave.
Yes, I remember.
Which was a precursor to Britpop, you know. But yeah, nowhere near as successful.
No, but because it is pretty, it's pretty punk rock compared to.
Yeah, I mean the single was Speed King, wasn't it? And the cover had a cereal bowl full of speed with straws sticking out of it.
And Northern Uproar.
Well, that was a bit later. That was Heavenly, so it was the Manics connection, and it was actually me and James from the Manics produced their first two singles. And then I just went on and carried on and did the whole album kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were 17-year-old lads from Manchester. You know,
very young, and it was around the sort of when Oasis were first breaking, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So if you were from Manchester and a bit gobby,
yeah,
you're in.
But they were lovely kids, and it was fun, you know.
Yeah. So do you think all the things that you'd learned from doing, or by the seat of your pants, really, from either the early days at Conk and then into doing the Manics, did you find that you'd found a good working practice? Did you keep changing?
I definitely kept changing I mean, I think looking back, I realised that it probably took me a lot longer to develop as an engineer. Like, if we're separating the production. From the production point of view, I was always a real opinionated fucker. So I would always wade in, kind of thing. So I have a perspective, and I felt like I was being paid to bring that perspective. So from a producer point of view, that was always there. From an engineering point of view, it's only in the last... It's shocking to me, really, that I only feel super comfortable doing that since about the last 5 years, really. I think I would have developed as an engineer much quicker if I'd have had the normal path of engineering for a producer. So I did have to sort of work it all out myself by trial and error, which is obviously a longer way.
I understand what you're saying. I mean, I think as a mixer, I've really got okay in the last 10 years.
Yeah, you're brilliant.
Well, that's really kind of you say, but I listen back to the old stuff and I think, I really didn't know what I was doing. You know, I just did what I thought was right.
I'm always shocked when my early records, when I listen to them, I wince before it, you know, and then it sounds all right, and you're like, wow, how did I do it? Because I know that I didn't know.
That's
really.
Exactly it. I've found myself that the more I relax on whatever I'm doing, the easier and the better it comes to me. I used to get so intensely involved, and I'd be sort of shouting and screaming and want to throw the monitor out. I'd be sort of, you know, and I'm a lot more kind of relaxed about it now, I think. And for me, that seems to work.
Doesn't it? That does.
Well, I'm very old.
No, I mean, well, the early Manics records, all through the 90s, right up until 2000 and whatever, were very intense records to me. I mean, like, they're absolutely. James is my brother. You know, he's my best friend in many, many ways. I love him. But we do have that brothers relationship with all of the stuff that implies. So when we're in the studio together, that can get really fractious. You know, hopefully in a positive, creative way. Yeah. But it relaxed. It was not.
How is it now working? I mean, is it the same? Do you still?
Well, no. I mean, I've been working with them for 29 years, so it's. It's comfortable, of course it is, but there's still those moments, of course, because that's very much part of their creative process. And one of the reasons why I presume that they tolerate working with me is that they can be themselves 100% because we know each other so well. So within that creative process, they're not worried to be that way.
Yeah, you don't feel like they're going to tread on anybody's toes.
Exactly, so they haven't got to filter what they're doing in any way. And they can be themselves 100%, so they can be more creative like that.
Working with the Manics now, do you think, is there kind of a set way of you working with them, or is it always...
The best thing with them is that there's always a manifesto for every record. Like, everything is thought out, like lyrically and musically, and there's always rules. Kind of thing. And rules are there to be broken, of course. But so, for instance, when we did Send Away the Tigers in 2006, they were coming off the back of Lifeblood, which, through no fault of their own, was a brilliant record and sounded brilliant. It was Greg Haver that produced it, who's a close friend. and did an amazing job. But they fell into that Franz Ferdinand hit that year, and Franz Ferdinand was a big, exciting thing. And so either you were a young band that was post Franz Ferdinand, or you were an old band and you were pre. And like, so there was a record Idlewild did that year as well, and that was a brilliant record. And that didn't do anything either because it was just not that time. You were either jerky post punk or you weren't. The thing is, Manics were jerky post punk 10 years before that. You know?
Yeah, right.
But so they were coming, you know, they were at a lull. You know, Lifeblood had not been a massive success, and so they had a sit down and think about, you know, what is it people that like about our band? What are we best at? And how have our audience grown with us? And so they knew they needed to make an anthemic rock record, but they couldn't make it like a punk rock record, like, you know, with like, you know, really high gain guitar, you know, right down to the details of the sonics kind of thing. And so James was very particular about dialing back the gain because he knew their audience had got a little bit older and that they wanted it to be sort of more lush and widescreen and less sort of thing. And so, you know, the rules on that record were set out. No more than 2 amps per guitar sound, and no more than, you know, trying to be less is more.
So do you think that they set out to create a hit record by doing that?
Absolutely, yeah. Every time they go in a studio, they do that. They like hit records. That's, of course.
Yeah.
Who doesn't?
Well, no, quite right. I mean, you always want your records to do well, don't you? But sometimes it happens by magic.
Yeah, for sure.
And there are other times you go in and go. Remember, there was a question I was going to ask you about. We call it the level 42 question.
Right. Why the level 42?
Well, allegedly,
Yeah.
level 42 were successful. They were doing well, but they really wanted to sell a lot more records. And so they decided, they said, right, we are going to write a bunch of hits.
Right.
And they did. And they were very, very successful.
Yeah.
They were quite arch about it. They were like, this is what we're going to do.
I think Simple Minds did that to a certain extent, but don't you forget about me. Because they've been such a...
I love early Simple Minds.
Amazing,
It's
amazing.
incredible.
It's the precursor to Acting Baby that we were talking about, you know, that kind of industrial, but with...
Yeah, yeah.
But I think they
But then they did Up on the Catwalk and all the rest of it.
Yeah. And I love the ambition of that. The point where art and commerce meet is a really fascinating place. I love the idea of a band being super ambitious and wanting to make something that they love, but also is super commercial.
Yeah, rather than,
to be fair,
just going to be art.
With If You Tolerate This, that's probably the one where we weren't trying to do that. Like, we re-recorded that as a B-side.
Really?
Yeah, we go, well, because it's a jerky song about the Spanish Civil War. I mean, like, there was no feeling that was the big hit single or anything. I mean, we went into Rockfield and we started with that, do this little B-side, and then we'll get on to the important stuff kind of thing. And I mean, it's not that they didn't love the song, kind of thing. They knew it was a brilliant song, but like, you don't think of a song about the Spanish Civil War as being a #1 single. You just don't, you know. And so we did have a little bit of freedom with that one, to, I suppose, not think of it in those terms and to be a little bit more artistic with it, which is ironic, really, because that was the one, you know.
But James sort of can't really help himself but write a pop hook.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, it's not that they were trying to be,
which is,
you know,
I think is wonderful.
No,
I mean,
of course.
I'm all about that.
Yeah, of course.
Of course. I think it's great. I mean, I always used to say to people that my favourite thing in the world is fucked up pop songs.
Yeah, of course.
That's it for me.
But we're kids of the Nirvana time, aren't we?
So I'd just like to talk about some of the other bands that you were doing. Obviously, the Manics was the big thing for you, but also Idlewild.
Idlewild. I've actually done as many records with Idlewild and offshoots as I have with the Manics. Rod is a very close friend as well, and now a brilliant producer himself with a studio in...
Is he?
Yeah, he does great
know
work in Edinburgh, yeah. They have a studio called Post Electric Studio, and it's got a ton of gear, big SSL and a lovely live room. But yeah, I connected with them on their second record, 100 Broken Windows.
Yeah, because I did a couple of mixes on their first...
You did Want to Argue, yeah.
I did Want to Argue, and I'm a Message.
I'm a Message. I mean, the songs were amazing.
They were great. I mean, I was just sent them to do as sort of standalone...
radio mixes,
single mixes,
yeah.
I mean, that was what happened at the time, you know. And I thought they were great, and I didn't know anything really much about them.
Well, they were on the cover of the NME on that record for the most exciting live band in the country. That was the
Yeah.
Because Bob, their bass player, spent more of the gig in the air than he did on the floor, and he was like madly headbanging, and so it was really punk, but also really REM kind of thing.
Yeah.
They were like an amped up,
Yeah.
spikier REM, with all these really cool melodies and literate lyrics, but like it was really fucking fast and loud as well.
Yeah.
And very wiry because, Bob was in the air a lot, so he wasn't really hitting his bass that much. So it was just a lot of guitar
It's
and
all about the
drums.
dancing, man.
Yeah. So they were a very exciting live band, But I was brought in. They were deeply Roddy, the singer, was deeply suspicious of me because the record company brought me in as the radio guy, to make. They used to laugh and call me FM Eringa, because they'd done their first record with Paul Tip. They'd done a brilliant job, and
Yep.
he'd done some mixes, and then they decided they wanted to work with Bob Weston, who's an amazing engineer, worked with Albini in Utero.
Yes, of course.
And so they'd gone to Air Studios with Bob and done this session, but it was all very live, of course, and they were a band that sort of needed at the time a little bit more
Polishing up.
but yeah, a little bit more producing. The songs were so, the songs were so good and so pop, really, that they deserved a little bit more than just right. There's the band playing, and we'll stick the vocal on top.
But to be fair, that was his vibe, and that's what the band obviously brought him in to do.
100%,
Yeah.
100%. No, he did a brilliant job, because I mixed what he recorded, and it was brilliant, of course. But the record company heard it and were like, okay, I think we need something a bit more commercial kind of thing. And so they called me, and so I came in on my back foot because the band, were like, we're artistically intact, and we've just done this cool session, and who the fuck are you, kind of thing. But that first session was a song called Little Discouraged and another song called Roseability, and both of them were brilliant songs. And we did it at Jacob Studios, and I can't remember at what point I won them over, but there was some point during that session that I kind of won them over. And both of those turned out to be singles and were really great, and it started a long collaboration.
So, Dave, let's talk a little bit about what you've been up to recently.
Well, the one that's been a big part of the last 5 years is the Who connection. Well, which happened because this is a good example of why it is sometimes okay to do something for nothing, kind of thing. I worked with a brilliant band that I thought were great called Goldheart Assembly, who were kind of like the band. Really beautiful harmonies, amazing musicianship. And they asked me to do... I was friends with their manager back from the 90s, and he phoned me and would I do a couple of mixes, basically for nothing kind of thing. And the songs were so lovely that I did. And then I think I did a few more as well. And that just coincided. He was really close friends with Johnny Chandler at Universal, who had been asked to make a record with Wilco Johnson and Roger Daltrey. And obviously the assumption was this was going to be two old rock stars patting each other on the back. It was going to be really boring. It was a bit of a pain in the arse. But he just asked Goldheart's manager, do you know anyone that can do it the old school way? Because that's what we're going to need on this. And so I just happened to be in his head because I'd just done these couple of free mixes. He wouldn't have thought of suggesting me. When I spoke to Johnny, I was like, yeah, of course. And, Wilco had cancer at the time, pancreatic cancer.
Was this going to be his sort of farewell album?
Absolutely. Well, he was going to die in the next couple of months. There was no doubt about that at the time. It was him and Roger had met at an awards ceremony and had a shared love of Johnny Kidd and the Pirates and that kind of music, R&B, obviously.
Yeah.
And they'd said, we should do a record together. And Roger always loved Wilco because he was such a sort of quirky British phenomenon. The way that he was.
Well, the feel-goods were incredible.
Yeah,
I loved them.
Totally. And they were the proto-punk band.
Well, it was that interesting time when pub rock became punk rock.
Amped up R&B riffs with but with that attitude, with speed eyeballs coming out of your head and using your guitar as a weapon when everyone else was like long hair and yeah man, it's all about the groove.
Well, it was Lee Brillo, the singer, lending Dave Robinson the money to start Stiff Records.
Wow. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
there you go.
400 quid.
Yeah. Fuck. Yeah, I mean, Wilco's a legend. So there was no expectation for this record. Wilco was quite poorly. We had 5 days in a studio called Yellowfish in Surrey that was relatively near where Roger lived.
So was this done relatively live then?
So Wilco's never recorded with headphones. No choice but to set up drums, bass and guitar all together.
What did you do? Use wedges or something?
No, he could just, he was happy to overdub a vocal, but not a guitar kind of thing. So, and just couldn't really, because he'd never done that. So no, it was just set up the band. I had a day to get drums and bass and to get his amp set up. He had a little Cornell amp, but I knew it wasn't enough, and so I took down a Marshall and a little Watkins Westminster and hid them in another room and split his signal. So he was like, "Wow, you're getting a lot out of this amp." I was like, "Yeah, great." So he did. It was admittedly only a small combo in the room, and Norman had his bass amp in the room as well, and just
Norman
Watroy. From
amazing,
the Blockheads,
you worked with him.
Yeah,
That's
because Wilco's band is Dylan Howe, Steve Howe's son, an amazing drummer. Norman, who's obviously
a godlike genius.
Yeah, a godlike genius, and Wilco, who's also a godlike. Yeah,
so were they all just? There was no headphones for anybody. It was all.
No,
it was like a rehearsal room.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, obviously Roger was going to put his vocals on after. And it was basically, all of Wilco's favourite songs, and the idea was, that it would be a nice, because he's obviously like a big Who fan from, he just always remembers as a kid seeing that Maximum R&B poster and just being, so it was just such a thrill for him. But no one had any high expectations of that whatsoever. And so, and I think we just sort of captured this energy, and Roger was so extraordinary, as a singer on it, just because he would not sing them the way that they were, because what's the point? That's just karaoke, which I think Wilco found challenging at the beginning. It was like, but that's not how it goes.
Yeah. I've been listening to it for 50 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Roger had to find his voice for the song and reinterpret it in a way, and sometimes it was like watching an acrobat. You'd be pressing for the stop button because you think, oh, he's fucked up, and then he'd land on the beat in such a original way. It was just like, Jesus Christ. But I just hit it off with Roger a bit, and because that record was an unexpected success, he asked me to do a solo record with him, which I thought, obviously we'd done this record in 5 days for the music and 3 days for the vocals. I was like, yeah, here we go, we'll have this done in no time. But it was a 4-year.
I remember speaking to you.
Journey, yeah.
We met up at some, I can't remember what it was, but we were in a pub and you were halfway through it, I think, at the time.
It was killing me.
Yeah. You were quite wiped out by it at the time.
Well, it was a brilliant record to me because he forced me to listen to. Well, no, I mean it was just part of my research. He wanted me to put the band together, and he wanted me to find the songs. He said, "Oh, I know I've got a voice, but I don't always know what I should do with it. If you know what I mean, like I want you to."
So this was very old school production,
really old, yeah. And he had a very particular. Lyrically, it's all about the lyric for Roger.
Yes,
the song is the lyric for Roger, and so it's the character he's going to inhabit for that song. So you imagine for 50 years he's been interpreting Pete's songs, which are all the way from, I Can See from Miles and Miles to songs on Quadrophenia where they're really character based,
Yeah.
So it's a very wide remit, but he wanted to make his Otis album. That was how we started. So he wanted to make a soul record, but it had to have a lyrical slant that he was happy with. So and that changed over the 4 years continuously. I found a song called "Coming Out the Rain" that was a Parliament extra track on a greatest hits, and it was just an amazing song. I just felt it was perfect for the time. It was an anti-Vietnam song, and the chorus was the bridge was the president's talking about change, but no one's got sense enough to just come in out of the rain. And then it was when will we all start getting together, learning to live and love one another. I just thought, fuck, this is the song, this is the one. And when I first sent it to him, he absolutely loved it, and so that forced me to get. I want it all like this. So I listened to every protest song from the 60s, every really obscure, and it was weeks of just sitting in here, just listening to music on Spotify and YouTube, and just trying to find these obscure songs. But then the next week he'd like something else, and oh no, I don't want it to be political anymore. All of that.
Just choosing the materials must have taken a long time.
That was the bit that took all the time. I mean, the band was Jeremy Stacey on the drums, John Hogg, who is in Magpie Salute as the singer now.
Yes.
He was in a band called Moke that I'd produced.
With Sean.
With Sean Janaki.
I love Moke. They're a great band.
Amazing band, yeah. And Sean on guitar, who has been a right-hand man for me for many years. And Mick Talbot on keys, who was on the, I should have mentioned, was on the Wilco record. Mick is such an amazing presence in the room, and obviously is a big Who fan, but is also just so schooled in that music, which I'm obviously not. I was this kid that grew up, listening to Guns N' Roses and Van Halen, so I had to educate myself in this music, and having Mick there to be able to look over and go, "Is that all right?" kind of thing, that was just brilliant. So the actual recordings, we did 2 sessions in Rockfield, and it was all live. Jeremy next to Mick on the piano, some screens, the amps in the other room, but it was guitar, bass, drums, piano, or Hammond live completely. And then we'd overdub brass, and all sorts of things happened after. But the actual spirit of that record is all live. And I love it. It wasn't like a massive hit or anything like that, but I really love that record, and I love the sound of it.
Do you think this is a kind of a way for you? Do you like this way of making records?
I do, because in all my records for a long, long time, I've always, at the very least, wanted the drums and bass to go down together, unless there's a very extreme situation. Just because I did a record once in the mid 2000s, and there wasn't a lot of money, and so we were doing everything live, like as a time thing, kind of thing. And we were in Hoxton Square, and it was going really well. The band were really lovely. The bass player was out there, he was standing right next to the drummer, and he was playing. It was really good. And we got the tape, but he'd made a mistake in the second verse, and I was like, "No problem. We'll just get you in the control room and we'll just fix that." And I just literally brought the leads through, so it was all the same signal path and everything. And just said, "Right, let's drop in on that bit on the second verse." And he said, "Okay." And we dropped in, and the level was like half the level. Like, it was tiny. I checked all the leads, and I was like, "This is the same signal path. What's going on here?" We dropped in again, still half the level. And then I realised he's not standing next to his mate anymore. And that was when I thought, right, it's not just like oh man, it's a better vibe. It's like, it's actually really fucking different musically. And so from that point on, I always tried to get the bare bones of it.
I totally agree with you, Dave. I look back on the records I've made over the years, and the ones that I still love. I love all of them for various reasons.
They're all like children.
Oh, they are. Make me weep. But you know what I mean? You love them all for various reasons, and it may have been because some of them, you were having an incredibly hard time making it, and it was relief to get to the end, or it was just joy from beginning to end. But the ones where they've been done mostly live, and there's the ebb and flow of that.
Yeah.
Are the best ones. There's no doubt about it. They're the ones that they have more of a longevity, I think.
No, definitely, because it's a human connection. I mean, it does sound really wanky, but it is.
No. It's not wanky.
There is a humanity in the small errors, or just the way that great musicians, it doesn't want to be on the grid. The snare wants to be behind. The bass wants to be behind the kick drum. You don't want those things to be super tight because they're not giving space to each other. And you can't. I mean, maybe I'm sure there's geniuses that can program all this shit, but I'm certainly not one of them. And I don't know where the magic lies. I want the musicians to give me that. I want to hear what the band is.
Yeah.
Even if that means it's like super tight and jerky and a weird, like some punk records are like that very like no feel on the 8s hi-hat thing. You can't fake that.
I remember having a great conversation with Pete Thomas, the drummer who was in Elvis Costello and the Attractions.
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
Who, apart from being incredibly tall, is a very nice guy.
Right.
And I remember I was a bit pissed, and I remember collaring him at a party. I love those early Elvis Attractions, those records. I think they're incredible. And I was just, how did you make them sound so intense? And I was asking him, I was just like, because they sound like it's like edge of your seat stuff.
Yeah. Was it Nick Lowe?
Nick Lowe was producing. Yeah. Anyway, Pete said, well, that's exactly why they sound like they do. He said, because what happened was they were 8-track to start with. They were all done live. And Nick would come into the studio, we'd play through the song, and then Nick would come into the studio and say, I think we should maybe just change that, chop that, da-da-da, a bit of, arrangement change. And you go,
Yeah.
okay, great. And then they'd start playing again. And then you'd wander out again and you say, yeah, maybe we should just double that, lose that, da-da-da. And they go, okay, right. Then you come out again and be like, yeah, maybe if we change that. So all these things that normally you do in pre-production, they do. So Pete said, by the end of it, they're so wired about trying to remember all their parts and all the changes that they're just so intense when they're playing, just to try and get through it. And I said, you know what, it really comes across. Because you listen to those records.
A wiry energy.
They're so wired.
And that's the same thing we were talking about with Appetite for Destruction, just that thing of like being nervy, being on the edge. When I was lucky enough to record The Who after we did that, Pete Townshend's playing was still like that. Every pass we did was just about to fall off the cliff, like searching for a new thing. Nothing was ever the same on every take. I was like, fucking hell.
But isn't that exciting?
Oh, no, it's amazing. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's like pulling the neck off the guitar, isn't it?
I think it's also a good discipline as a producer, I think, as well, to go with it. Because it's so easy nowadays
to fix everything.
To fix anything. Yeah. And I think actually having the discipline, and perhaps that's something that, because when we started, it was before all the computers and stuff, so it was what it was. On tape, you got the best tape you could. Maybe it's something that's come from that, but maybe it isn't, I don't know. But I think it's a great skill to be able to just listen to the performances and say, that's it, that's the best you're going to be doing.
Yeah.
Whether it's ragged or slick.
Yeah, for sure, because you're serving the song, always trying to serve the song, and some songs want to be ragged. Imagine if someone had done the grid to Libertines. Imagine how shit those records would have been. It would have been awful. I do think that once you've captured that energy, then you can do anything. So I've got no problem with then putting the London Symphony Orchestra on it or whatever, because the raw thing that communicates that rhythm or that emotion is there, kind of thing. So I've got I've definitely been guilty of what you said. There's a brilliant episode of Frasier where he's tasked with doing a jingle for his radio show, and of course he goes ridiculously over the top and scores it for orchestra, and he's sitting there at the piano in his flat, and he's got a massive orchestral score in front of him, and he's pulling his hair out, and he looks like Beethoven. And Martin, his father, who I fucking love, walks over to him and says, "Hey Frasier, sometimes less is more." And Frasier just like almost throws the sheets up and goes, "Yes, but if less is more, just imagine how much more could be." And I was definitely guilty of that for a lot of years.
Well, I mean, you've just summed everything up. You've edited it perfectly, but there's one question I must ask you.
Go on.
Kylie.
Yes. Me and James, it was a Manics collab.
Okay.
So she co-wrote the words with Nikki, and James and Sean wrote the music for 2 songs on her album that was going to be called Impossible Princess, but wasn't called Impossible Princess because it was slated for release the week Princess Diana died. And so the whole album was pulled. So we did a song called Some Kind of Bliss and a song called I Don't Need Anyone. And she was in her indie Kylie phase, and she was an absolute dream to work with. She was so lovely. One of these big stars that has worked out that if you're nice to people, you get even more out of them. And she was lovely to everyone, including all the musicians. Me and James have the distinction of producing Kylie's smallest ever hit, because it came out the week Princess Diana died, and people weren't in the mood for a song called Some Kind of Bliss that week. And then the album was to be the week after, and it was pulled and then renamed Kylie Minogue and came out 3 months later and was, But yeah, no, I mean, it was she was wonderful. I MD'd her band for a while after that. I played keyboards on Top of the Pops with Kylie, and that was another little box ticked. Yeah.
Dave Eringa, thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you.
So there we are. Our thanks to Dave for chatting with us about some of the highlights of his career and his undying passion for music. I hope you enjoyed this podcast, and please don't forget to subscribe.